Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Playbook. Here to talk about some things that help us control the deal. We're doing it all month. We're talking about components of the deal that we need to be aware of, intimately aware of, to avoid our deals from backsliding, from getting out of our control, from us being put in a position where, maybe we feel like we have no grip on this and that emotions are flying high. Our job is to be the foundational, the secure, the one that helps not only control the emotions, but make sense of hard things and prevent issues. We're going to talk about preventing an issue. For the last few years, a lot of agents have become spoiled. If you got in 2020, even just a bit before, been spoiled by a lot of things. Maybe the opportunity, is certainly one of them, but I think that also gives the opportunity to fail. And when you are in a market that is fast moving and you fail, there's another opportunity right behind it. And so if we don't stop and think about how do I avoid these things from happening in the first place, we're not going to become better and we're not going to survive in markets like the ones we've been in for the last 12 months. So what we're going to talk about is how do I avoid the appraisal issue? How do I avoid my listing or my buyer being put in a situation where we have a third party telling them the home is not worth the price you have on the contract? Because sometimes the price on the contract is completely market driven. There's 20 people that would be ready to step in and write that offer again, should this one fall through. And so when we're putting our buyers in a position where they feel like, well, did I miss something? Like, how do I get beyond the appraisal issue and still buy the house? Can I afford to do that? We want to make sure we're not getting into that situation in the first place, if we can help it. Housing Wire recently published an article called The Appraisal Gap in 2026, talking about how thin comp pools, climate volatility, and increased lender scrutiny are making valuation accuracy harder. Now, historically, only around 10% of purchases have an appraisal issue. Now, this is not the same in every market, right? Because the percentage shifts when inventory shifts, when transaction volume slows, and when maybe lenders start getting tighter on valuation issues. And also, there's plenty of properties that people are willing to pay over and above appraisal should that situation occur. But we want to make sure we're not in the 10% if we can help it. Sometimes, let's look at it from a different perspective. Sometimes you're representing the buyer and it works out well for your buyer. You're able to negotiate a lower price. So it's not always a bad thing. I don't want to act like it is. But more times than not, right now, we have buyers and sellers who have already had a fight to get to the price that they're at. The sellers have already come off their price. The buyer has, maybe felt like it was a little high and now it comes in and now emotions are running high. Appraisals aren't becoming harder because appraisers have changed. The market has changed. From the article, it says Housing Wire pointed out that elevated mortgage rates over the last few years reduced transaction volume, which means appraisers now have fewer relevant comps to work with. Less sales means more interpretation, more guessing, more creative comparisons, and interpreting creates variance. We see this in Florida. If you've done a market analysis in the last month, 2 months, 6 months, you might have had a property where you've done a market analysis on, and there is very little that have sold in the last 90 days or 6 months. And you're having to look back and say, well, how do I make sense of any of this? Because the 2 comps I found that have sold are nothing like this property, right? You're really trying to draw some sort of comparison. In October of last year, regulations came out requiring lenders to quality control the automated valuation models, AVMs, that they're using for lending decisions. So lenders are leaning into trusting the AVMs less now than they were previously. So there was a period where the market was moving. We were in an increasing market. And to underwrite these loans, we would see maybe appraisal waivers. They're putting down 20%. The market's moving in an upward trajectory. You're getting an appraisal waiver. We saw a lot of that. It still happens, But overall, with the government backed loans, we're seeing less and less of that. So we are having real appraisers walk the house, compare, try to make educated decision on what the true market value is. So how we handle that matters. Most agents have no idea about the differences maybe of an AVM model versus an appraisal model. How do you make sense of the AVM model in light of an appraisal that may differ in opinion? And it will. They all will differ in opinion. One thing that also got highlighted in the article was geographic differences, meaning national models struggling to try to understand hyperlocal neighborhoods, which is certainly a challenge. When you take a county and you put it on a trajectory line, and you know when this home sold last, trying to make sense of, does that projected value, does that matter? Or do the 3 or 4 most recent sales around the comp matter, the subject property matter? That's what the appraiser does, right? So we've got to make sure when we're looking at AVM, do we have any ability to understand how it's derived? And you can do that with a lot of these. I'll do a separate episode on that where we talk about a couple specific ones that you can interact with and make them really good. It will be a good backdrop for you when you're pricing a home, offering on a home, or meeting an appraiser. But your local expertise matters. And I think the more you understand that, the more you're going to be able to potentially affect falling into the appraisal gap issue. Appraisers aren't there to just justify your contract price. It feels that way many times. They're there to defend and support the value with an opinion of value. Now, pause for a minute because I've heard it now. As you're listening to this, you're probably going to say, well, how come if they're not there to just justify the contract price, how come so often if I've got a $500,000 sale price, contract price, does that appraiser's opinion of value land awfully close or maybe right on target at my $500,000 appraisal price? I thought that for a long time. What is that about? Now, we've got to understand they're working for the lender to justify that value. They're not looking to tell you what they believe the full opinion of value is. So what I find is more times than not, and I'll explain why here in a minute, more times than not, they actually will work their opinion of value and then they'll land their opinion of value number that shows up in the appraisal at or just above what the contract price is. Now, the reason for this is in the psyche of the appraiser. This helps us understand what they're trying to do because they are, like we talked about earlier, quality controlled. The AVMs are quality controlled. The appraisers are quality controlled. They're trying to make it all make sense, right? So if the contract price was $500,000, and then I go and I do an appraisal and say, well, this was a slamming deal, and I put $550, and then it goes before the quality control board, and they look at the appraiser's opinion of value, and they do the AVM, and the AVM says that is high risk kind of a number. And the real value is much lower. Even though my contract price may still be within the AVM value, that report will get flagged. So what's actually happening a lot of times when that number is so specific is the appraiser is trying to get out of the way of a future flag from the quality control department, from the appraisal management firm, that will control and quality control these. Just a little nuance to understand why that happens so often. What are the appraisers actually looking at? I would say to think that appraisers are not swayed by walking into a nice house that feels good, smells good, looks good, checks all the boxes, the upgrades are done nicely. To think they're not swayed by that at all is silly. It's nonsense because it actually should carry weight. It doesn't carry all the weight, right? They don't care much about, other maybe things that might drive a buyer to make an offer on it. Maybe something that would be emotionally appealing to a buyer for, how the full layout stuff. They're looking for marketability and comparing directly to comparable sales, right? So more data driven. But to think they're not swayed at all by the other stuff, I think we've got to understand when we are meeting an appraiser, we want to put our best foot forward. We want to make sure the appraiser understands the house the way the buyers would have felt the house. If there was multiple offers, they need to know that. Is it going to influence their opinion of value? Probably not really, but it is an interesting data point, even if it doesn't make its way into the appraisal, right? So the selections that they make, the comparable selections they make matter immensely because they're going to look for like-kind properties. When they're looking at pictures of other sales, they're going to look for ones that have a feel similar to the one that they're comparing to. The best appraisers try not to make too much stuff up. They really try and find sales that matter. So this is where it matters for you. The information and the way in which you speak to them matter, because if you understand they are trying to not put their neck out there and make a guess on what the value of this, maybe this pool is, but rather I could compare to a home with a pool versus one without. That's going to be that's going to tell the story better. So one of the things I mention to our agents all the time is we've got to make sure that we run our properties, the comparables that we want to provide to an appraiser, through an adjustment scenario. We want to make adjustments for pool, view, square footage, bathrooms, all these things before we go and lead and take them a bunch of comps that we feel might just justify the value. Because sometimes you show up with comps, once they're adjusted, they actually don't help you. You've got to make sure what you're presenting matters. Most appraisers want to be able to hang their hat on one or two key comps, and everything else is going to help tell the story in the secondary fashion. You need, if all you've got is one that you can point to and you say, this is the same house, similar lot, it's only got these key differences, that's something most appraisers can get behind. Now, you've got to see this from the other side as well. If there is that one, but it doesn't help you, you've got to understand why it sold for so much less than yours did. You've got to help them. You've got to tell the story as to why it should be adjusted more or why it should be thrown out altogether. If something never actually went to market and wasn't an arm's length transaction, it sold to a neighbor and never hit the market and just posted, like that is information that needs to be considered and known and shared. Unless it helps you, then maybe leave it in. But we're going to know all the strings we've got to pull to make sure we're presenting on a clear platter the things that are going to give us the highest likelihood of success. So one of the questions is, do you meet the appraisers on site when you're representing the seller? I would not be going representing the buyer. I think that's generally frowned upon. But as a seller, as a listing agent, you get the opportunity to represent that house, provide access. If you need to be a gatekeeper, do that. Don't make this process hard on the appraiser, though. We're here to make a friend and make your job easy. Okay? So we meet our appraisers when we're listing agent on site every time we can. I'm not saying it never happens where it doesn't. Sometimes there's nothing to worry about. Very rarely are we that confident. Or it's an appraiser we've worked with. He said, hey, send me your package. And that's what I'm going to talk about now is what do we want to share with them? Because the best agents don't wait for there to be a problem. They manage the risk before it becomes an issue. These are things we can control. These are sales strategies that we're going to bring to bear for our sellers and tell them when we're sitting across the table from them that I'm here to help you avoid issues. I'm here to help you avoid pitfalls that could otherwise lead us down a challenging road where a transaction falls through, where you're forced to give up, $10, $20, $30,000 like that because one guy who we don't know, who's not buying the house said so. I don't want to leave that up to chance. And if we're really doing a good service for our seller, we need to do that. I just want you to know, I believe with certainty, we're going to see more appraisal issues in this coming 12 months than we did even in the last 12 months. Because of exactly what this article said, comps are more scarce. Lenders or appraisers will use market trends, trending market data. Is the market going up or down or flat to adjust for historical sales? If I go back 6 months for a comp and the market generally has gone down since then, they may not be willing to let this one sell for as high as that one. These are market movers, right? If they are placing their opinion in that way on it, we've got to understand how they think about this. Each appraiser is going to have a different opinion on it. One of the things I want to make clear to that appraiser when I meet them on site is that, hey, I know what I'm doing. Here's how we justified it before we got started. Here's how the buyer who now has written an offer justified it and considered it. And here is the data you're going to need to help make this make sense. Here's 2 or 3 comps you need to know about. Here's one that you're going to see and you shouldn't use it. Here's why. I talked to that agent. You should call them as well. Not an arm's length transaction. Needed a new roof, whatever it was. Like, find out why the bad sales happened and explain it. So the things you want to bring, we're not just bringing an MLS printout that says the facts that he already knows about the property, he or she. We want to bring the comps. We want to bring any and all improvements that have been done in the last 5 years with estimated costs, right? So if I had a roof put on and it was $35,000, I'm going to list that in 2024. If I had the HVAC put in earlier this year, I'm going to say it's 2 systems, this brand, it was this much. If I've got him, I need to make sure I'm helping him. If he is $5,000 short, I want my improvements package to help push it over the edge. Some people say, well, this isn't really my job. It's the appraiser's job. Like, I don't agree with you. I believe this is your job to do on behalf of your seller. We've got to help them understand the neighborhood changes, that the market's been improving in this neighborhood. Why? Is it the schools? Is it has there been new roads coming in that may make it more accessible and now more appealing? And so we're seeing an increase. What is the changes that have occurred since maybe the last couple sales? Now, remember, if we're using really good sales, none of this other stuff really matters that much because it's accounted for in those sales. If I'm jumping to a different neighborhood, and this is where the hyper local agent wins, and I'm saying these 2 streets are different than everything that way. If you jump over this major road, it's a totally different set of comps. You've got to stay on the east side of this road, right? We've got to be that confident in the story in which we're telling. So the things I want to bring information on the subject property, the 3, 4, 5 comps with notes as to any little nuances that need to be considered. My improvements package with estimated costs. And these are things you're just going to get from the seller. If you have a survey, give them the survey. If you've got a floor plan, give them the floor plan. These are things that make their life easier, and you probably already have them, right? Grab those things, put them in a package, print them, take them with you, give them one for the road. If you want to send them a digital copy too, do that. Take them one that they can then make notes on. What you're going to see is they're going to now be making their notes on your floor plan. They're going to be double checking your survey. Your time's going to be saved because they're going to be out of there a lot faster. They're not having to run measurements on everything, because if they can confirm this is the floor plan, this is the square footage, I can just use the county's, measurements, right? Confirm a couple things. It's going to be a lot quicker than starting from scratch. So my belief is you should meet them there. You should grant access. You should be the gatekeeper of the house. Tell a story, whatever it is you've got to do to be able to help them have a good opinion on how they're going to consider this. Also, don't be pushy. Ask them if there's anything they're missing. Have they already looked at comps? Sometimes they're going to say, yes, I've got it all. I've got nothing to worry about here. That's great information. You can leave feeling good about it. They might say, haven't looked at it at all. Perfect. I've got exactly what you need. They might say, I'm a little worried about this one. Let's then dive in and say, well, here's 2 or 3 things. Maybe you saw, maybe you didn't. If there's an issue as to why you don't want to use any of these that I've brought, I'd love to hear about it. I'm trying to be educated so that I can carry this knowledge forward to my next appraiser meeting and my next listing appointment. Use this as an educational experience. They all operate a little differently. Doesn't mean you can't learn something from them. They're not just a hurdle to get over. They are a part of the experience that you need to master, especially if you're new in this. Use this as an opportunity to learn. They're going to tell you exactly why they can't use that comp, and you're going to say, got it. That makes a lot of sense. I'll find something else. Would you mind if I do a little bit more digging since that one's off the table, and I'll send you some more this evening, whatever it is. Or they might help you fill that gap. Don't be the one that knows everything. Be the one that's there, willing to learn. The market is shifting back towards skill. This is a skilled agent's market. You can't work your way in social media and get through this part of the process. If you're going to leave it up to chance, one, tell your seller about it. Tell them you're not willing to spend the time to go out there and help push this over the edge. Social media can't solve this. You've got to protect the value. You've got to defend the price. You've got to give the details that are going to help to justify it, because typically your story makes sense. Someone liked it for a good reason. Now, I'll close with this. If you know there could be appraisal issues and you're going to contract anyways, sometimes we need to label that. What do we do if this happens? I'm concerned because there's not a lot to justify. We feel the value is here, but we don't know, you need to understand how the other agent perceives that. Because I've heard agents that say, hey, we'll just deal with that when we get there. I'm not worried about it. Let's just get to contract. If it comes in low, we'll figure it out. It depends which side you're representing as to how you want to posture in that regard. Just because your buyers have the ability to come up over and above appraisal price to pay the contract price doesn't mean they want to. Just because your sellers have a number that has come down doesn't mean they can't go get a higher offer from somebody else right at, immediately. So we've got to understand all of the moving parts. Then we got to go help manage it when it's time. That's game time. Go defend the value. I think about it a lot like this. When I'm sitting at the listing appointment and we're talking about value, we're kind of a defense attorney, right? Doing our initial strategy, our consult. At some point in the future, you now have to go be in the courtroom defending those facts, right? So you've got to you don't want to just list to list. We want to list knowing that I can put everything forward I've got and defend it well. I want to defend that price well when it comes time. That's what the seller hired me for. Hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for listening.